This is TV Travel Battle. I'm your host, TV Travis, and today we've got a knockdown, drag-out fight encompassing philosophy, theology, sociology, and psychology, and probably a bunch more ologies I'm forgetting. In this corner, we've got Agnes Callard in the New Yorker, and on this side, we've got Douthat in the New York Times. The Battle of Yorkies. And the title might say battle, but this is all-out war. 2 articles enter, 1 article might leave. Let's go. The travel battle began when its first shots were fired on June 24th, 2023, when the New Yorker released this article, The Case Against Travel by Agnes Callard. Most of this video is going to be about that article, so if you haven't read it yet, you should probably go and read it. It's in the description. Reaction to this article is pretty negative, and honestly, same. Draft 1 of this video was actually just a hit piece about that article, but we can do better than that. And listen, usually I love the New Yorker. I'm a big fan of Andy Borowitz, shocker. Not enough of a fan to pay a subscription fee, but enough to click when the clicking's free, and this was. And boy, am I glad it was free, because I wouldn't have wanted to pay for this crap. This is not a likable article, and it's not trying to be. It reads like a master manipulator, in that it pulls a bunch of quotes from a bunch of dead guys, and then takes them all out of context, twisting them to its own nefarious ends, constructing this argument against the concept of travel. And I put the word travel there in big quotes in the script, because this is Agnes's definition of travel, a carefully constructed straw man that she builds up to then attack with a quiver of quotes. And let's take a second to read some of those quotes that make up the first barrage. G.K. Chesterton wrote that travel narrows the mind. Ralph Waldo Emerson called travel a fool's paradise. Socrates and Immanuel Kant, who the article describes as, quote, arguably 2 of the greatest philosophers of all time. I mean, Socrates I get, but Kant? Really? Voted with their feet, rarely leaving their respective hometowns of Athens and Königsberg. Königsberg. But according to Agnes, the greatest hater of travel ever is Portuguese philosopher Fernando Pessoa, whose wonderful Book of Disquiet cackles with outrage. All right, I guess let me try and cackle out this quote. I abhor new ways of life and unfamiliar places. The idea of traveling nauseates me. Ah, let those who don't exist travel. Travel is for those who cannot feel. Only in extreme poverty of the imagination justifies having to move around to feel. I would love to know what's going on in this guy's life that he's projecting onto travel, because it's unhinged. What did travel ever do to you, man? And this is the first thing we need to remember about Agnes's article. It's into this. It finds delight in causing outrage. You can see it in the way that she describes that last quote as a cackle of delight. The case against travel for Agnes is a cackle of delight designed to outrage people like me. Put a pin in that one. Anyway, she goes on to quote Samuel Johnson. You've probably seen this picture. And that guy wrote a dictionary, so you know he had a robust personal life going on. What I gained from being in France was learning to be better satisfied with my own country. Spoken like a Tory. A friend at a party once told him he was going to China on vacation, and this is what he said. There would be a luster reflected upon your children. They would at times be regarded as the children of a man who'd gone to view the wall of China. Eesh, man, why you gotta bring his kids into this? As you can see from the start, this article is drowning in ego. It then asks this question about what travel actually is, and we should probably take a minute to define travel, seeing as this is TV Travel Battle. Agnes offers this as a preliminary definition. Travel gets branded as an achievement. See interesting places, have interesting experiences, become interesting people. First off, branded by whom, Agnes? Second, contained within that definition is a deliberate contradiction, one which Agnes calls the traveler's delusion. It's this idea that when we travel, we become the best versions of ourselves, when in reality we actually become the worst versions of ourselves. We demand things of the places we travel to based on our preconceived notions of what that place is. And then we turn around and demand change in ourselves based entirely on the fact that we had these allegedly life-changing experiences. Travel then is a self-fulfilling prophecy foretold by us, the travelers. It's like a nice little snake eating itself. And this idea of travel sees it as part of a larger global industrial complex based around assigning value to to experience, while simultaneously inflicting a monoculture of tourism on those cultures we're allegedly paying reverence to. And we don't even realize it. It's like a plague. We bring about an attention economy just by visiting somewhere. That's a Western academic viewpoint if I've ever heard one. A tourist is a temporarily leisured person who voluntarily visits a place away from home for the purpose of experiencing a change. And Agnes is quoting Hosts and Guests here, a boring academic book about the anthropology of tourism. Sounds fun. She focuses in on the last word like a hawk. Touristic travel exists for the sake of change. But what exactly gets changed? Tourists are less likely to borrow from their hosts than their hosts are from them, thus participating in a chain of change in the host community. We go to experience a change, but end up inflicting a change on others. Notice how she keeps coupling the concept of travel with the concept of tourism. Two completely different things. And that's going to be important in the larger travel battle. So anytime we talk about Agnes's article, we need to keep in mind that she's talking about a very specific type of travel: tourism. According to Agnes, everything else isn't leisure travel and therefore doesn't fit the definition of travel. Agnes then tries to relate her lack of personal change to a trip she took to Abu Dhabi and this falconry thing she did that allegedly won awards for excellence in tourism. There's your first problem, Agnes. Don't trust awards for excellence in tourism. Agnes says she did this falconry thing because she didn't really know what else to do in Abu Dhabi, which sounds like a personal problem to me. Why go to Abu Dhabi if you don't know what to do in Abu Dhabi? Hopefully you planned your trip out at some point. And this is a running theme in this article. Agnes is constantly falling victim to the exact industrial complex she's railing against. I entered the hospital knowing my post-Abu Dhabi life would contain exactly as much falconry as my pre-Abu Dhabi life, which is to say, zero falconry. If you are going to see something you neither value nor aspire to value, you are not doing much of anything besides locomoting. If you don't find joy in something, why are you doing it? Why did you travel to Abu Dhabi, Agnes? Sorry, I'm doing it again. Getting upset at the article just like she wants. All right, so some people don't travel for themselves. Agnes's favorite philosopher, Socrates, if you haven't put a pin in that now, do it, was forced to travel during the Peloponnesian War. If he engaged in touristic activities while abroad, he didn't do them because he sought them. They kind of filled his time while he was unable to go home. And this is a distinction that many of the people opposed to tourism, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, try to make, steering the critique away from people who travel when, quote, his necessities or duties demand it. That's work, war, family, etc. She also mentions that Emerson has no qualms about traveling great distances for the purpose of art, study, and benevolence. Hey, that's just tourism. All right, let's talk about the Mona Lisa, because Agnes poses this quick hypothetical conversation with somebody who went and saw the Mona Lisa.
I went to France. Okay, but what did you see there? I went to the Louvre. Okay, but what did you do there? I went to see the Mona Lisa. That is, before quickly moving on, apparently many people spend just 15 seconds looking at the Mona Lisa. It's locomotion all the way down.
I don't think that most people would agree that if the room were empty and you had infinite time to examine the Mona Lisa, they'd take a lot longer than 15 seconds to look at it. But as Agnes argues, travel by its very nature has the taint of locomotion built right into it. Travel will never give you the same experiences like living in a place. And unless you actually live somewhere, everything you experience in that place is constructed by either the tourism industry or your own preconceptions about the place that you're about to travel to. And while on vacation, you will rarely have a controlled experience that shakes you out of those two things. When you go to France, you will experience the construct of France, not what it's like to be French. To most Americans, France is Paris. It's the Louvre, it's the Eiffel Tower, it's the Mona Lisa, the Moulin Rouge, and so on. And here, Agnes argues that cultural focal points like these are even more difficult to connect with. So going back to the Mona Lisa, if you don't care about paintings, what is the Mona Lisa to you? Is it just like a bucket list accomplishment to check off? Who told you to put that on your bucket list? What should a person who doesn't care about paintings experience when they visit the Mona Lisa other than the dopamine rush of completing a task? A cultural focal point experienced. At a certain point, the Mona Lisa can be reduced to nothing more than paint on a canvas. And it's at this point that Agnes compares the Mona Lisa to a room full of falcons.
If you usually avoid museums and suddenly seek them out for the purpose of experiencing a change, what are you going to make of the paintings? You might as well be in a room full of falcons.
She admits she does not find enjoyment in falcons. And if we took her article as a true representation of the author, we can conclude that she also doesn't find enjoyment in experiencing art or being around other people or much of anything. But we have to remember, this is not a true representation of Agnes or her opinion. This is a persuasive argument, a case against travel. This paper is academic. Agnes is posing a question here. Is participating in the experience of seeing the Mona Lisa at the Louvre improving anything in your life? And what about for everybody in Paris? When I think of Paris, I think of art. How many people live in Paris because they think of Paris as an art city like me? And how much of that perception is because of the Mona Lisa? How much of art is participation in cultural rituals that seek to tie our minds to symbols designated as important by people of and in power? Is the Mona Lisa even the best painting at the Louvre? No. Let's have an abstract thought. What's the real work of art on display at the Louvre? There are 7 billion people in the world and only one Mona Lisa. And all the logistics involved on a global scale to get people in and out of that place, that's impressive. That in itself is a work of art to be marveled at. And I would argue, participated in just as much as viewing the Mona Lisa. That's the thing about art. It's meaningless without participation. C.T. Nguyen, who I mentioned before in my money game video, calls this activity aesthetic appreciation, one of the core aspects of art. Physical things usually don't change us. It's the activities and experiences around those physical activities that actually do the changing, for better or worse. Unless you're a painter, seeing a painting like the Mona Lisa isn't the point, nor is buying something in the Louvre gift shop. It's everything that goes into that moment, start to finish. The change you experience by going to see the Mona Lisa doesn't happen when you see the painting, it happens all the time, before, during, and after. Why go to a museum on vacation? Is it to participate in some cultural ritual dictated by an edict of personal growth and change? Or is it to experience and appreciate one of the most important tools humanity has ever created for communication? You know, painting. Art. Anyone can see the Mona Lisa. Here it is on the screen. And you can read all the information about it and its creation that you want on the internet, right? Now that the internet exists, nobody technically needs to go see the Mona Lisa in order to be an expert about the Mona Lisa. So why go see it at all? That's the argument here. The other people, the time crunch, the enormity of the Louvre, it all feeds into the experience. What Agnes would call tourism.
One sign you have a reason to be somewhere is that you have nothing to prove, and therefore no drive to collect souvenirs, photos, or stories to prove it. Let's define tourism as the kind of travel that aims at the interesting.
So how do we find interesting things to experience? Well, brochures, ads, travel shows, photographs, YouTube videos, word of mouth, etc. And this is, in my opinion, the core of what Agnes is getting at with her article. Without the tourism industry telling us that travel will be this transformative experience, would we even have the desire to do it? Travel is a self-fulfilling prophecy we create in our brain, born from a necessity to engage in once-in-a-lifetime experiences that we're told are going to transform our lives, and then buying a little shot glass to prove that we did the thing. And this is all part of a larger philosophical concept by Theodore Adorno called the culture industry. The idea here is that the Mona Lisa is no longer art. It's a brand centered around facilitating the flow of currency. The Mona Lisa at this point is less about aesthetics and more about economics. So what makes the Mona Lisa so famous? Is it the smile? Or is it just that it's the most famous painting in the world and everybody's heard of it? Or is it because it's part of the most famous art theft in history? Like I said, the culture industry surrounding the Mona Lisa affects not only the Louvre, but Paris and the entire identity of France as a country in the mind of the French and the people outside of France. Tourism creates culture while simultaneously devouring it. The Eiffel Tower is the most famous structure in Paris, but when it was built, they hated the thing. The people of Paris thought it was ugly and too tall. They wanted it gone. And now they've come to love it because it's a cultural focal point that facilitates tourism and the flow of money into France.
You are experiencing, you're connecting, you're being transformed, and you have the trinkets and photos to prove it.
But I don't actually agree with this assessment of why people collect trinkets and souvenirs. This is actually the thing I personally disagree with Agnes on the most. It's her most misleading assertion. Let's talk real quick about souvenirs. Personally, I collect physical objects to remind myself of a moment in my life. A photo is a memory recall tool that lets me sort through all the slop, like a file on an external hard drive. Like my stuffed animal is how I remember my Grandma June and playing under my blankets when I was supposed to be sleeping. And this is something that plagues Agnes's article when you read it. Incorrect assumptions about people's intents and purposes. And it's intentional. Remember, Agnes has a degree in Socrates, a person famous for making statements you either agree with or disagree with, and then expecting you to figure out why you agree with or disagree with it yourself. So Agnes pulls out this essay called The Loss of the Creature by Walker Percy. It's a terrible essay, actually. Agnes quotes him talking about two different types of traveler.
First, a sightseer arriving at the Grand Canyon. Before his trip, an idea of the canyon, a symbolic complex, had formed in his mind. He is delighted if the canyon resembles the pictures and postcards he's seen. He might even describe it as every bit as beautiful as a picture postcard. But if the lighting is different, the colors and shadows not those which he expects, he feels cheated. He has arrived on a bad day, unable to gaze directly at the canyon, forced to judge merely whether it matches an image. The sightseer may simply be bored, or he may be conscious of the difficulty, that the great thing yawning at his feet somehow eludes him.
And this is my mom. She's a photographer, and the thing she likes to collect is photographs. She likes to go see if she can capture a photo exactly how they did it in the brochure. The photograph is what initially drew her to the place, so that's what interests her. And she gets real disappointed if it doesn't turn out exactly like the one in the brochure. But also, it's not like it ruins her whole vacation. Recreating perfection is her hobby, not the purpose of the trip.
Second, a couple from Iowa driving around Mexico, but are a bit dissatisfied by the usual sights. They get lost, drive for hours on a rocky mountain road, and eventually, in a tiny valley not even marked on the map, stumble upon a village celebrating a religious festival. Watching the villagers dance, the tourists finally have an authentic sight, a sight which is charming, quaint, picturesque, unspoiled.
And that's my dad. He despises what he calls typical tourist stuff. He's a big history buff, so what he's drawn to is historical places, temples, ruins, things like that. He likes seeing how things evolved over time until they wound up what they are today. That's his hobby, and his favorite part of travel is when we get to stumble onto something that we find interesting and he gets to learn something. Same, I wonder where I get that from.
Back home in Iowa, they gush about the experience to an ethnologist friend. You should have been there. You must come back with us. When the ethnologist does, in fact, return with them, the couple do not watch the goings-on. Instead, they watch the ethnologist. Their highest hope is that their friend should find the dance interesting. They need him to certify their experience as genuine.
Whoa, Walker. What are you doing, man? Who acts like this? Seriously, how oblivious do you have to be to think that you can perfectly replicate something that you saw on your personal vacation for somebody else? I mean, that experience was personal to you, right? And yet, that's exactly what the tourist industrial complex wants to do. Sell you on the idea of a place in order to fuel a monetary transaction. You know what happens when we take the motivations of corporations and apply them to people, right? We get weird stuff like Percy's examples. Why would you need an expert to tell you that you experienced something genuine? I mean, shouldn't you understand that yourself if you experienced it? And for that matter, why do you need Agnes to answer the question of why you travel? You can and should answer that for yourself. And spoiler, that's the point of the article. Now hang on, I'm not Agnes's challenger. That's some other guy, isn't it? So far this is just Agnes firing off blindly in all directions, hoping to hit a target. So who besides me did she hit? Where is her opposing general? Agnes's article was posted on June 24th, 2023. And 1 month later, on July 28th, the New York Times published an opinion article, a direct response to Agnes's article calling her out by name, called The Case for Tourism by Ross Douthat. I'm gonna keep my Ross opinions to myself here, but I could do like a whole video about this guy and the interview that he did with Peter Thiel.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But
What a freak. Ross was hand-served Agnes's juicy morsel of an article right as he was about to go on vacation. I see you, algorithm. Where Agnes's article screams of a person who travels alone, entirely for themselves, Ross's article instead screams, did I mention that I brought my kids on vacation?
Dragging 4 kids across 3 countries by plane and rail and car is obviously not an ideal method for encountering the divine. And indeed, most of our overt gestures in that direction tended to flop. The looks we received as our 3-year-old prowled the Rijksmuseum were not especially conducive to a deep communion with Rembrandt. I could imagine Callard nodding in vindication when my 7-year-old son wanted to take a picture of himself in front of the Mona Lisa, but not in front of one of David's Napoleons on the grounds that the Mona Lisa is famous, Dad. Much like the family drive we made across America last summer, our European vacation functioned as a clan initiation as well as a grand tour, which, of course, is the real function of family vacations generally, to create bonds as well as open vistas.
So there you have it. Speaking in favor of travel, we have the pro-life, Catholic, conservative family man, Ross Douthat, writing for the woke New York Times. Ross asserts that mankind seeks the absolute through cults of art and cults of nature. I too have played Baldur's Gate 3 and... What, that's not what he's talking about? What is he talking about then? Okay, so basically he's saying that art and nature are both expressions of the divine, of God, or some other higher power. And as creatures of that higher power, humans are naturally predisposed to seek those experiences out. Therefore, in Ross's view, the purpose of travel is to become closer to God. Yeah, just like the Nine Inch Nails song. Now, it's important to note here that Ross doesn't make a distinction between the Catholic God, the ancient Greek gods, the awesome power of science, any of that. Just the abstract concept of a higher power, very Masonic of him.
But those cults, art and nature, still assume some idea of the absolute, some special power and agency operating through the different totems and locales. Whereas once skepticism strips away the religious residue, once relativism makes all greatness a matter of the beholder's eye, travel can degenerate into a process where the self changes location but remains closed to the different kinds of change, buffered against both the supernatural and the superhuman, with what Callard calls the conventional wisdom about what you are and are not supposed to do in a place, replacing openness with a place's secret power, its numen, or its god.
It kind of sounds like he's describing a Miyazaki movie there, doesn't he? He also mentions that travel doesn't need to be about the absolute or God or whatever to have a transformative effect on your life.
And if you don't achieve that kind of absolute encounter, there's still room for travel to be edifying in ways that exceed mere entertainment.
And then Ross goes on to describe his vacation. The one with the kids. Did I mention that he brought his kids? Which doesn't go according to plan, and was generally ruined by said children. That's my opinion. He allegedly still had fun. He comes away from the vacation changed, but not because he got to do any of the things that he wanted to do, or see any of the things that he wanted to see, or experience anything that he wanted to experience, but simply because he made the attempt with his family and they became closer because of it. That's the transformative power of travel, in blatant opposition to Agnes Callard's claims. Case closed, but not so fast, for they were all of them deceived. Who is Agnes Callard? In all the response articles I read online, none of them seemed to understand what Agnes was doing with this article. And I mean, it took me a second read through writing the script for this video to even get it, so I understand. I don't know, you'd think that somebody like Ross over at the New York Times would be better than some guy on YouTube at media analysis. Agnes has written extensively about one of my favorite philosophers, Socrates. She's got Socrates philosophies popping off the top of these something. I forget what the lyrics are. I forget what song that is. Anyway, Socrates is a guy famous for making statements you either agree with or you don't. Not a lot of middle ground with him. And then expecting you to figure out why you agree with or disagree with a statement on your own. It's the Socratic method. By working through your thoughts, you gain a better understanding about the world around you and yourself. For Agnes, responses like Ross's and all the other ones I read online, and even this video, are exactly how we should be engaging with her article. As an open dialogue among philosophers, questioning the core principles of our beliefs. She's not making an argument to be right, she's making an argument to make us think about why we travel. It's a subtle difference. Ross lost this battle immediately by taking her words at face value. You might be thinking, hey Travis, what makes you an expert on Agnes and her thought process? How do you know what she's trying to do here? Here's the back of the book description for Open Socrates, a book she wrote about, you know, Socrates.
In Open Socrates, Agnes Callard shows that In fact, we understand almost nothing about the Socratic project. Socrates' radical aim was to force us to confront the assumptions that prop up our lives and our worldviews, and to ask whether those assumptions are correct, or whether they hold us back. Teasing out the profound insights of the father of modern philosophy, Callard reveals that what we usually think of as thinking is in fact anything but. True thinking can only happen in a dialogue with another person. Only through conversation can we inquire into the fundamental questions of our lives. And only by following Socrates' model she demonstrates can we truly understand politics, love, and everything else that matters.
Also, I asked her and she said that's what she was doing. So with everything we've talked about so far, let's look back at Agnes's experience in Abu Dhabi doing falconry and how she talked about the Mona Lisa. With a better understanding of her thought process, we're gonna ask ourselves one simple question, one she actually asks in the article itself.
If you usually avoid museums and suddenly seek them out for the purpose of experiencing a change, what are you going to make of the paintings? You might as well be in a room full of falcons.
And we can see here immediately that Ross's explanation for Newman as a reason for travel is just like way off in left field. He has no idea what he's talking about. Or maybe he does. Maybe that's why he travels. Agnes isn't saying there's a right or wrong answer here, only that there are answers and we can derive information from those answers. Most of the articles that I read missed this point, and indeed what I would call the point of this article in general. What is the purpose of travel if you also aren't enriching yourself in your everyday experience? If you aren't into paintings, why are you going to see the Mona Lisa? We're experiencing a crisis in media literacy around the world right now. People just can't see past what's in front of their eyes. They're ignoring subtext and context and every other kind of text there is in the world. And that's what Agnes and Socrates and philosophy in general is trying to make you do. Think about the world in a way that you don't currently. Why are you going to see the Mona Lisa? What do you get out of it, and why? Why go travel and see the Golden Gate Bridge? It's just a bridge for transportation. Is there an inherent Newman to this place, as Ross said, and you're coming here to have a religious experience about it? Why do you travel? Literally the only question being asked in this article. I want to return real quick to this idea that Agnes presented earlier in the article, the traveler's delusion. So the traveler's delusion is supposed to encourage a re-evaluation of the expectations and motivations behind travel. It prompts individuals to question whether they are genuinely engaging with new cultures and environments or merely seeking out predetermined emotional responses. Here's the core problem. The traveler's delusion is itself a delusion about travel. You got a KFC double delusion, gunking up the system. All right, let's take a look at this absolutely wild passage that Agnes wrote in the latter half of the article. If you think this doesn't apply to you, that your own travels are magical and profound, with effects that deepen your values, expand your horizons, render you a true citizen of the globe, and so on, note that this phenomenon can't be assessed first personally. And this is where Agnes's single-minded focus on the Socratic method turns against her. See, Socrates swore by this debate technique called a dialectic. It's like a dialogue between people holding different points of view about a subject, but who wish to arrive at a truth through reasoned argument. But Agnes rejects introspection and self-reflection as accurate gauges of personal growth. Get him out of here. She doesn't need him. Pessoa, Chesterton, Percy, and Emerson were all aware that travelers tell themselves they've changed, but you can't really rely on introspection to detect a delusion. So you cast your mind instead to any friends who are soon to set off on summer adventures. In what condition do you expect to find them when they return? They may speak of their travel as though it were transformative, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But will you be able to notice a difference in their behavior, their beliefs, their moral compass? Will there be any difference at all? That's kind of silly, right? And in social situations, we're constantly putting masks on ourselves.
That's correct, Wendy. We all wear masks, metaphorically speaking.
Altering how we interact with people, what we say and how we say it, never showing our true selves. I talk to my coworkers a lot differently than I talk to my best friends, which I talk to a lot differently than just a normal friend. There are rules and norms constraining the things that we can say in a social context and how we can say them. How many murderers were described by the people around them as such a normal person? The truth is, I'm a very bad gauge of what's going on in other people's heads, as are most people. My friends know themselves themselves better than I ever could. I mean, I might be able to see a little bit of change in them, but they know their brains better than I do. This is why I think so many people took offense to Agnes's article. Her solution to the traveler's delusion, to quote the back of her book, is dialogue with another person. Yet, as Ross pointed out in his article, Agnes never seems to take other people into account on her travels. She doesn't seem to travel with other people, have that dialectical conversation while she's traveling, and her reasons for traveling seem utterly selfish. The philosophers Agnes quoted out of context weren't saying that tourism and travel are bad and that you can't grow and change from these experiences. What they were saying was exactly what C.T. Nguyen was saying, that without engaging with experiences on a personal level and solely deferring to the opinions of experts, you rob yourself of the ability to grow. That's it. That's what those misquotes were all about. That's what she's trying to say in this article. When it comes to travel, I have a little bit of a different opinion than Agnes or Ross. For instance, when I travel to a country that has free healthcare, I don't come home and go, boy, I'm glad I'm back where I get to pay $400 on healthcare.gov for a silver tier insurance plan. Oh, are they taking that away now too? Great. Nah, it's more like free healthcare. What a concept. And it transforms my brain into wanting that for my country. So let me ask you a question, and let me ask a question of all the would-be intellectuals out there who don't seem to see the merits of travel. When you travel, who do you travel with? When I read Agnes's article, I read it from the perspective of somebody that travels alone. While Ross Douthat and I undoubtedly disagree on a lot of things, something we both seem to agree with is that travel's better with other people.
The communal aspects of travel, the sharing of experiences and misadventures with friends or family members, or even new acquaintances on the tour bus, is undersold by Callard's polemic, in which a solitary-seeming traveler is forever sliding haplessly across the surfaces of things, and the conviviality of travel seems altogether absent.
A selfish person might travel to become an interesting person and instill themselves with erudite sophistication. But that's only one type of personal change that can come from travel. As Ross said, doing things together changes our relationship with the people that we're doing it with. That came out wrong. Doing things together changes our relationships to people. It also allows us to have the type of Socratic dialogues that Agnes really wants to have when she's on vacation. This is Ross's core argument, and it's an obvious one. Agnes leaves this aspect of travel out of her case against it because it crumbles the entire argument to the ground. But that's exactly what she wants us to get out of this article. The argument is imperfect, and she knows it. We've spent this entire video so far talking about all its flaws and various weirdness, and coming to conclusions about why travel's important and what we actually get out of the activities we spend our time pursuing. I mean, why travel when you could read brochures like the guy in Portugal, or Wikipedia articles, or books, or the Travel Channel? How is the concept of travel different than the act of travel? And what is actually transformed in our lives by performing the act? I want to talk about the people who instilled in me a love of travel. My parents. Well, I guess this is happening. Now I want to talk about the people who instilled in me a love of travel. My parents. My mom's a photographer, so she'll do all this research on all these famous photo spots. And if we get there and the photo's not all it's cracked up to be, she'll get real disappointed. And if we're minutes late for something, she'll lose her mind. My dad is the opposite. He follows my mom's schedule and accepts that whatever she has planned is probably going to be at least interesting and easy on his knees. Sometimes he's wrong to trust her. Now, we're the exact people that the article is describing. We will argue and fight and bicker the entire vacation and swing wildly off schedule based on whether or not we actually want to spend time at the places we go to, if we find them disappointing or not. Despite my mom's best effort at order, our trips are usually chaos. Now, I want to let you in on a little secret. This is, in my opinion, the key to living a happy and fulfilled life. Shh! Scruffy, I am filming a video right now. Come here. You can find joy in disappointment. You guys, stop it. I'm trying to film something. All right. I was privileged enough to have my parents take me to Tahiti when I was in high school, because my dad's really into this author, James Michener, who wrote all these historical fiction novels, very boring stuff, one of which was Tales of the South Pacific. My dad's also a big fan of pirates. No, not that one. Well, maybe that one, actually. I don't know. So he's always been really into the South Pacific and French Polynesia in general. While we were there, we were driving down the road, minding our own business, when this kid comes out of his house and chucks a rock at our car, which was wild. When we got back to where we were staying, we asked the groundskeeper, Mo, a local I'd made a personal connection with on vacation. We were like, yo, why did somebody chuck a rock at our car? And Mo looked a little ashamed and kind of lowered his voice and said, they probably thought you were French. This history lesson's brought to you by my friends at Encyclopedia Britannica. They're not supporting this video, but I do know some people over there that could use your support. Just your eyeballs, man. Wikipedia might be one of humanity's absolute greatest inventions, but it's also chock full of misinformation, and Encyclopedia Britannica is not. Tahiti became a French colony in 1847. After World War II, French Polynesia became an overseas territory of France.
Je tiens à dire à la Polynésie française combien la France apprécie le service qu'elle lui rend en étant le siège de cette organisation qui doit assurer la paix à coup sûr à notre ensemble français.
In 1958, Havana Aupa, vice president of the Council of Government, announced his plan to secede from France and form an independent Tahitian republic. He was subsequently arrested and the movement collapsed. In 1963, the French government had begun testing nuclear weapons on Aurora, which the Territorial Assembly ceded to France the following year, along with the neighboring Fangatufa. In response to worldwide pressure, the tests were moved underground on Fangatufa in 1975. However, the detonations continued. In the mid-1980s, political parties and environmental protection and human rights groups united to protest France's nuclear testing. In 1985, world attention focused on the area when French commandos blew up a yacht owned by the environmental group Greenpeace, as it was preparing to lead a protest near the Marora Atoll. In 1992, French Prime Minister Pierre, oh my god, I'm gonna butcher this, Bérégovoy suspended testing, but President Jacques Chirac ordered its resumption in 1995. Amid widespread opposition from the French public and within the territory itself, France exploded a bomb under Marora. The test was followed by rioting within the French territory. Mounting anti-nuclear pressure led the French to reduce the number of planned tests from 8 to 6, and the last device was detonated below the Fangatufa Atoll in January 1996. What is that, 1963 to 1996? They endured 33 years of nuclear testing. Later in 1996, France signed the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, or the Treaty of Rarotonga. In 2006, a government committee of inquiry reported that France had hidden the extent of radioactive fallout from the above-ground tests. The committee recommended that France monitor public health in the region, compensate the Polynesian citizens affected, and clean up the environment. And of course, the French government rejected the report. In 2009, the French government offered approximately $10 million in compensation to those affected by the nuclear testing, but the offer was obviously refused as insufficient. Although French health officials in 2012 identified fallout from the nuclear tests as a probable cause of ill health in those exposed and financial restitution remained on the table, France of course disregarded ongoing requests for environmental remediation. In March 2003, France changed the classification of French Polynesia from overseas territory to overseas collectivity. Then in 2005, I visited Tahiti. Thank you, Encyclopedia Britannica, who, again, are not sponsoring this video. I put a link in the video description to the Encyclopedia Britannica article I was referencing, and while you're there, you can go into a similar Wikipedia hole, just with, like, actual facts. Travel is a boomerang. It drops you right back off where you started. Literally, it's been like a year since I started this video. I think I mentioned it in like my third video. I haven't finished reading this insane New Yorker article yet, so this video is not going to be about that. So this thing really got away from me, temporally and physically. I had to like wait till I went on vacation to finish it. I returned from Tahiti completely unchanged, with no new thoughts about colonialism, or the way that the global north exploits the global south. I learned nothing and remained completely unaffected. Travel is actually pointless and you shouldn't do it. It enriches nothing in your life. Instead, you should be like the boy from Lisbon who collects brochures and remain locked away in your own fantasies about the world until you die, having spent a life content to dream and never experience. Agnes closes out by asking this really nihilistic question.
If a vacation is merely the pursuit of unchanging change and embracing of nothing, why insist on its meaning? Travel splits this expanse of time into the chunk that happens before the trip and the chunk that happens after it, obscuring from view the certainty of annihilation.
Yeesh. Tell us how you really feel, Agnes. Here, Agnes takes the concept of a bucket list and twists it into a temporary relief from the all-encompassing hyperthought that someday we die. And this reveals how our egos can twist us into fearing the idea of being forgotten by time. These are the thoughts of people who want statues built of them, like my boy Socrates. When egotistical narcissists go on vacation, they collect souvenirs as a way to go back home and show their friends how cool and sophisticated they are because they traveled, not to remind themselves how much fun they had away from home. A materialist collects things to fill an attention void within themselves. And I'm not one of those people that goes around suggesting everybody go to therapy, mostly because I don't really find it useful myself. But Chesterton, Pessoa, Percy, and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and heck, even my boy Socrates, probably could have benefited from at least one session. And if there's anything we should take away from the dialogue Agnes is trying to have with us with this article, it's that the why of travel is far more important than the who, what, when, where, or how. I've spent this entire video talking about the case against travel, but now let me make a case for travel. Let me start off at Bye. Let me start off countering Agnes's quiver of quotes with a counter barrage of my own. You may remember way back in the beginning of this video, Agnes led off with this quote from G.K. Chesterton. Travel narrows the mind. But I mean, Mark Twain wrote, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." Honestly, a lot of the best quotes that I found about travel were actually just calls to get out of one's tiny little bubble. St. Augustine said, "The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page." To travel is to discover that everyone is wrong about other countries. Travel makes one modest. You see what a tiny place you occupy in the world. And of course, my dad's favorite James Michener has a quote seemingly aimed directly at Agnes's article. If you reject the food, ignore the customs, fear the religion, and avoid the people, you might better stay at home. All right, let's go back to G.K. Chesterton really quick, because I find it interesting that Agnes didn't even use his most well-known quote about travel, which came from this essay he wrote called The Riddle of Ivy. A friend came to see him as he was packing his bags for vacation. "You appear to be off on your travels. Where are you going?" "To Battersea." "I suppose I don't need to tell you that this is Battersea." "It is quite unnecessary and spiritually untrue. I cannot see any Battersea here, nor can I see any London or England. A cloud of sleep and custom has come across my eyes. The only way to get him back is to go somewhere else. And that is the real object of travel and the real pleasure of holiday. Do you suppose I go to France to see France? Do you suppose I go to Germany to see Germany? I shall enjoy them both, but it is not them that I am seeking. I am seeking Battersea. In my opinion, the whole object of travel is not to set foot on a foreign land. It's to finally set foot back in one's country as if it's a foreign land. It's not my fault, it's the truth that the only way to go to England is to go away from it." For Chesterton, the purpose of travel was the same as one of Agnes's earlier quotees, Samuel L. Johnson, the dictionary guy. "To better appreciate one's own country." Now, Agnes made this viewpoint out to be negative, but after hearing Chesterton's explanation above, is it? There are plenty of selective quotes you can pull about travel to make any case you'd like this one, also from Samuel L. Johnson, that supports my earlier healthcare argument. "All travel has its advantages. If the passenger visits better countries, he may learn to improve his own. And if fortune carries him to worse, he may learn to enjoy it." Like I said, this article is an academic essay intended to make you contemplate why it is you travel. To seek something out implies that there's something you currently lack, like this giant San Francisco 49ers helmet that I came to see. Now I can go home. There's actually two separate conversations being had here. The first is asking a question. What do you get out of traveling in return for the effort invested? In business terms, what's the ROI? But the second, less obvious question is, why are you investing in travel of all things to fulfill that lack in the first place? One of my favorite academic papers by the aforementioned C.T. Nguyen is called Autonomy and Aesthetic Engagement, and it offers some good insights as to why the people we've been discussing so far in this video have such baffling takes on travel and personal growth. Nguyen treats what he calls aesthetic appreciation or experiencing beauty as akin to a game, where the process of interpreting and exploring things is what gives art its primary source of value. If we look at travel as a process of engagement, of experiencing new cultures and things and places while we travel, that process becomes like more significant to us than if we had just got somewhere and were told exactly how to think and feel. It's playing that experience game that gives your travels meaning. Agnes might see herself looking for the inherent Frenchness in people as like a bad thing, but it's also a core part of the game of travel. Like if she were going to France to just experience the exact same people that she experiences in her everyday life, is it really traveling? And at that point, she's not participating in traveling, she's just the guy in Portugal looking at brochures. In Nguyen's paper, he refers to two types of people, which we'll call the skeptic and the fanatic. The fanatic, our Agnes, only listens to other people about what she should feel about a place, or think about a thing, or a piece of art, and accepts everything she's told as like the absolute fact, then goes and regurgitates it to her friends to sound real smart. Doing that makes her feel like she's engaged with the art correctly. Yeah, go for it. Next mindset parallels the idea that... So the fanatic's mindset parallels the idea that tourists often feel pressured to feel like specific emotional responses to landmarks or pieces of art or whatever they're traveling to. Like say somebody goes to the Eiffel Tower, they're supposed to be impressed, right? It's the Eiffel Tower. They've heard about it in every travel brochure they've ever looked at about France. A lot of times people will get to the Eiffel Tower and go, what am I supposed to feel? Tourists will always default to external expectations put onto a place or piece of art by somebody else. They're told to go look at something, so they go do it, and they get whatever they're told out of it. This lacks something that Nguyen calls autonomous engagement, when you yourself are engaging with a thing and creating that information feedback loop with that thing. That's part of aesthetic appreciation, that feedback loop between you and the thing that you're appreciating. Now, our skeptic, Ross, on the other hand, holds the view that tourists should always approach a new experience with like a critical eye. Throw out everything you've been told and make your own opinions for yourself while you're engaging with a thing. Like if you're able to connect with what he calls the Newman of a place, you should be able to understand its power and meaning. You shouldn't need a tour guide to tell you why like the Parthenon is significant to history. So the skeptic is probably never gonna fully understand the thing that he's looking at or the place that he is in. But he is also not burdened by going around France looking for the inherent Frenchness of people. They don't have some pre-existing idea of what it means to be French. They're just like vibing in France.
My parents used to always budget for a vacation, and they'd load us in the car and we'd camp our way around the US. And to see mountains and places so different from where we live instilled in me at a very young age the love of travel. I love Nevada bar novels where the park ranger solves mysteries in our national parks, and afterwards, after reading the books, I always want to visit those places like the Dry Tortugas or Isle Royale. Your dad and I always wanted to expand your horizons and experience other cultures. I remember being at the Roman Forum and you said, do you think Julius Caesar actually sat on this bench or walked these paths? Visiting the places like Sicily where my ancestors are from and visiting the relatives, it gives you a sense of where you've come from and who you are. You can read all the books you want, look at all the pictures, listen to the History Channel, the Travel Channel, but unless you're actually there and visiting these places, you never get that full experience. Is that good enough?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think out of everything that I read and researched, my favorite response piece to this article came from Arnie Weissman in this blog post he wrote for Travel Weekly. In it, he gives maybe the best definition I've heard of what travel is and why we do it. Taken together, these essays reinforce my belief that travel, for those who enjoy it, is life amplified. A vacation can be 2 weeks of unimpeded pleasure and insight to deepen your appreciation for what you're naturally drawn to. In Agnes's absurd example about the boy with the brochures in Portugal, I keep coming back to that piece. It's so weird to me. The boy from Portugal might be content with imagining these far-off places, but travel amplifies that passion into physical reality. If his life passion is his brochures, then what he's going to seek from travel is those brochures amplified. Travel is a luxury experience, and in my opinion, luxury fits Andy Weissman's definition extremely well. Just like luxury is life amplified through the lens of money, travel is life amplified through the lens of physical experience. Just like art is life amplified through the lens of abstraction. When you pass things through these conceptual lenses, they take on new meaning in your life, and life is about seeking meaning. The purpose of a lens is to see parts of the world that we might have otherwise overlooked. Like a drop of water from a pond that contains a bunch of microorganisms you can't even see with your eyes. Travel, luxury, art, science, these are all lenses that we can look at life through to see it in ways we might have otherwise overlooked. To amplify it and better appreciate the infinite aspects of it. Thanks for watching, and I don't know, maybe you tell me why you travel in the comments below.
Looking through photo albums, that sort of thing, looking at pictures, it's those shared memories. Everybody that goes on vacation, like the three of us, we all have different memories that we can share, something that really stood out to each of us. And I just love those shared memories. They're a lifelong thing.